LSD Dream Emulator. This is an interesting beast because I'm not even sure you can technically call it a game. It was 1/3 of a project used to explore the dreams of one of the people who was responsible for its creation. There was this game, an audio CD, as well as a book, although I don't have access to the other two, so all we can do is talk about the game. The game itself, as the name would indicate, exists to explore and emulate dreams. And while this isn't wholly a new idea, I think this game might be the single best media that's ever captured this concept. Because while you have books, and while you have movies, those are all passive bits of entertainment. We watch, we experience, we think about, but we're not really as involved in it as we'd like to be. I mean, sure, we could use our imaginations to place ourselves in the role of the character, but we ourselves are not experiencing it. And that's where the edge of interactive media, such as video games, prevails. But again, we've been making games about dreams since Super Mario Bros. 2. This game, however, aims to actually have you experience dreams firsthand, and allows you to become the sole driving force as to what affects the dreams. Now, like I said, I'm not sure I'd call this a game, so much as it is a walk around and bump into things simulator. Because that's essentially what you do. Essentially, you start a dream by waking up in a random area. Although the first night you start in your room, you then proceed by wandering around, trying to interact with various bits of the environment. And you do so by changing which environments you exist in. There's two ways of transitioning between environments, either by following static tunnels found in the environment, or by bumping into literally anything, either static bits of environment or moving set pieces. Coming into contact with these objects will warp you to a different part of the dream, as well as contact with these objects will change how your dream is experienced. Essentially, as you go through your dream touching different bits of environment, you'll affect your dream by becoming more positive or negative, or more vibrant or less vibrant, at least in theory. Near as I can tell, it's a little bit random. Unless it's a larger bit of compilation of various events, singular events don't seem to actually be tied to any individual teleportation locations. For example, I ran into the exact same piece of wall 4 times in one dream, and ended up in 4 completely different places. So, I don't think there's any direct correlation, unless, like I said, it's affected by cumulative buildup of information that I'm just not capable of tracking. That said, I think the randomness of it all is also kind of a key point of it being a realistic emulation of dreams. Sure, we all have dreams, and sure, we all have control within our dreams, but very rarely do we actively have any sort of understanding of how to influence our dreams. So instead, we walk around, we bump into stuff, we change things, but it's still just beyond our own comprehension. And I think that's what makes the gameplay of this so masterful, in terms of actually trying to emulate dreams anyway. Everyone's experience is going to be completely unique to them. This dream is your dream. This dream is also my dream, but my dream is going to be completely different from your dream. Because in LSD, it's your dream. Sure, you have the same number of set pieces as anyone else who plays this game, but your actions shape it for better or worse. You still have no frame of reference as to how your actions might shape it, and that's what makes it so emotional and dreamlike. Because it is you who are the cause of the frightening and beautiful things you may witness, but it's still beyond your own comprehension as to how you caused them to be. Now, while this game is basically just a giant walking around simulator, that's not to say that there isn't an antagonist to the game. There's actually kinda 2. The first one, and the most predominant of the 2, is the Gray Man. This being that exists in all dreams, although for whatever reason he seems to appear the most in the fantasy childland, so there's a good chance he might be some sort of weird fantasy pedophile stalker, but he's a guy that appears in a large gray raincoat and will chase the player down. He moves very slowly, but he spawns directly in front of the player, or at least the way the player is facing. So unless you're constantly walking backwards, there's a good chance he'll appear right in front of you. Now, while he's unable to hurt you, if you come into contact with him, the screen will flash, and it will actually erase your memory of the previous dream, making it so that you're unable to actually recall it and re-experience it. which is an interesting feature of this game, but again, due to the random nature, I'm not sure how well that actually works. The point is, it's nice that it has a face put to exactly one sort of looming existence that you don't quite understand, but is constantly there chasing you down. Now, the other villain only shows up in one location, and like a lot of things in this game, he's kind of a random set piece. But he shows up and just kind of murders you. And if you die, you wake up and you move to the next night. Similarly, if you fall off a cliff and die, you just wake up the next day. So there's really no threat of losing, aside from the fact that you wake up a little earlier and move on to the next day. Now, the main game itself contains something like half a dozen larger main areas that can be randomly full of moving set pieces. But similarly, there are also smaller environments, such as this weird little park with all these monuments, or even, and I don't have any footage of this, but I've been there, this weird, like, womb type thing full of little baby monster things. It was weird and creepy, and I wasn't sure what to make of it, which is an excellent way to describe this game as a whole. But what's interesting is, while this game only has maybe half a dozen main areas, as you continue to dream, through the culmination of your dreams, bits of the environment will change. Now, part of it seems to happen every 10 days or so, but eventually textures and stuff changed. Like, by the 11th day, all the textures were replaced with kanji, which was weird and disturbing, especially considering I didn't know what to make of it. After day 20, all the textures started, like, melting and stuff. And, like, by day 40, suddenly there were weird faces drawn on everything. It was really weird, and like a dream, it ends up being kind of unfathomably creepy, which makes this almost a sort of excellent horror game of sorts. Because outside of, like, the murderer and the gray man, you never see a face to any villain, because ultimately you are the villain. You are the cause of this evil, or lack thereof, and you are also the one who has to experience it. And because of that, it sort of also works as an active nightmare simulator, which might not have been the intention, but well done all the same. Now, there is one thing about gameplay that I do find rather odd, and that is that this game tries to quantify your dreams. Essentially, you have this weird chart which tries to track exactly where each night's dream stands. But, again, because each dream is kind of random, there's really no controlling over it, and there doesn't seem to be any correlation as to what this chart means and what you experience. Nor does this chart even seem to affect anything, so the fact that it's in here just seems like random fluff. Now, the presentation is kind of a mixed bag. Visually, it's definitely blocky, but the constantly changing textures and stuff make this game really interesting. Granted, after you see the basic textures 2 or 3 nights in a row, it gets boring, but if you push through that, you can see all sorts of weird, crazy crap in this game. And because of how random the set pieces work, you're basically always going to see something completely different, which makes this game really interesting. Now, audio-wise, this game is something of a mixed bag. First and foremost, this game is absolutely annoying in the sense that your character seems to be wearing giant weighted clogs, because wherever you walk, you're going to hear large clomping footsteps. And don't even get me started on the children's Fantasyland, which has large squeaking tiles you have to walk on. That made me want to break my controller in half, it was so bad. But the music itself is actually pretty interesting, because like the environments and set pieces, it seems to be wholly randomly generated, or at least generated through the culmination of your own actions. I've heard there's something like 500 different tracks in this game, and that's a bit of a misnomer, because each track is more or less a very small sound loop. However, near as I can tell, as you get transported to new environments, it seems to create a whole new song from various bits of sound loops in real time, which is pretty interesting. Granted, this doesn't really speak to quality of the sound itself, because you can run into very, very dull songs, as well as really high energy, almost sort of horror themes as well. So you're always going to be on your toes with this one, but whether or not it's good, well, that's really up to the luck of the draw, which isn't particularly good. Now, if you want to get LSD, the Dream emulator, well, I got some bad news, because first of all, it's rare and very expensive, and also an import. But I have some good news for you. If you take, like, the 5 minutes it takes to set up a Japanese PlayStation account and get an import PlayStation points card, well, you can get it for like $5, which is what I did. Although I do have one warning against this version, because I'm pretty sure it only affects the digital version, but I don't have a physical one to compare, so I'm not really sure. But you're gonna have to save frequently, because At least the digital version, it likes to crash a lot. But in the end, LSD, the Dream Emulator, is a weird thing. I'm not really sure I can call it a game, but it's certainly an interesting experience, and I still stand by it being probably one of the best introspective looks at dreams as a whole in interactive media, or in media period. And even if LSD doesn't speak to us about our individual dreams, I think it still speaks volumes about who we are as people, and how we explore our own dreams. And the reason is simply this. If you talk to anyone else who's played this game, they have a completely different experience, because of how random it is. And because they have their own experience, both in the game and their own life experience, they would likely interpret everything they see in this game as completely different, which in and of itself says volumes about us, as well as volumes about our own dreams. And I think if we were all to gather everyone around and just compare notes, we'd probably get a greater understanding of everything that has to do with dreams, because of this game. Or not, whatever.